So how do we actually use callbacks to execute a mission? Well, when we're executing a mission, it's important to realize that the vehicle actually goes through a series of states or phases. And I'm going to use the word phase here because the word state is pretty overloaded with other meanings in this context. And in general, there are many ways you can define your phases. For now, I'm going to stick with the phases used in that up and down.py code that you just saw. First, there's this manual phase. And in this phase, the vehicle's just sitting on the ground, and it's not being controlled by the flight controller. This phase ends when the arming phase begins. And this is just the phase where the flight computer takes control of the drone and gets the rotor spinning. This phase ends when the rotors are up to speed and the takeoff phase can begin. Now, takeoff involves the drone going straight up and continuing straight up until it's reached its target height. At that point, takeoff ends and landing begins. And landing, as you might expect, is just where the drone descends back to ground level. And it continues descending until it gets sufficiently close to the ground. And once that happens, the disarming phase begins, which is just where computer control is disabled and the motors are disarmed. Now, to really understand how these phases work in our code, it's important to understand the transitions that occur from one state to another. And in the code, each of these transitions is actually handled by a particular function, with names like arming transition or takeoff transition. So the transition, for example, from the takeoff state to the landing state is handled by the landing transition function. And in the previous video, you saw that there were certain criteria that had to be met in order for this transition to occur. Namely, the drone's height had to be greater than 95% of its target height. Now, I'd like you to look through the full code for the Up and Down Flyer class and try to identify the criteria under which each of these states ends. The real goal here is to really just read through the code and understand how this relatively simple flight plan is actually implemented. Because once you've done that, you'll be able to implement your own flight plan.